What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's episode of Not Your Average Meta is kind of a bittersweet one, as this is the last gameplay video featuring the 4 original members of the channel playing a game together. First with Robert once again bringing back his 5-color commander, Garth One-Eye. This deck looks to use Garth's ability and copy effects to cast multiple copies of legendary spells from the early years of Magic. Next, we have Justin playing what seems like his first deck to not include black or blue on the channel, and that's because he's playing Adriana, Captain of the Guard. This is a Night Tribal deck that looks to take advantage of his commander's melee ability and extra combat steps to smash in for the win. Then we have Foil returning with the Yurlok of Scorch Thrash. Like always, he's looking to burn his opponents out by flooding them with an all-important magic resource in order to win. Lastly, we have Fog Raw breaking out his mono-red Minotaur Neheb the Dreadhorde Champion for the first time on the channel. This deck looks to use his commander's wheel ability to pick and choose the cards he wants in order to pull off some kind of artifact-based combo win. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Fog plays a mountain, then taps 1 for Faithless Looting. Drawing 2 and discarding 2. Robert plays a tapped Katria Triumph. Justin plays a land for turn, then taps 1 for a Soul Ring. Foil plays a Snow-Covered Forest, and then taps 1 for Eladamri's Vineyard. Fog plays a mountain for turn, then taps out to cast his commander, Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. He then uses 2 more for Lightning Greaves before getting a rules clarification on Eladamri's Vineyard and returning the Greaves to his hand. Robert untaps and plays a Tundra for turn. He then taps 2 to dash in Ragavan, who he then of course swings at Justin for 2, exiling his top card and creating a treasure token. Justin plays a mountain before tapping 4 to cast Valiant Knight and passing. Foil draws for turn and plays an Arid Mess-Up before taking 1 to sack it, getting a tapped Blood Crypt. He then casts a Helix Pinnacle. Fog draws for turn, plays a mountain, and then recasts his Lightning Greaves. He then equips him to his commander and swings him at foil for 5, pitching 3, drawing 3, and creating 3 red mana after damage. He then uses his red mana to cast Scrap Mastery, exiling his Greaves, but getting back Scuttling Doom Engine, Spine of Ishal, blowing up the Vineyard, Scrap Trawler, Nim Deathmantle, and Psychosis Crawler from his graveyard. He then casts Thrawn Foundry and passes. Robert dashes in Ragavan again, swinging him at foil this time, dealing 2 and exiling his top card. He then plays a Marsh Flats and passes. Justin plays another mountain and then taps 2 for Knight of Grace. Foil draws and plays a tapped Timber Gorge. Fog untaps and draws, dealing 1 to his opponents. He then taps 2 to play a Key to the City. He then uses his key to make his commander unblockable and swings him at Justin for 5. He then discards 2, draws 2, and deals 2 more damage to his opponents and gets 2 red mana. He then taps 3 to cast extra planar lands, exiling a mountain. At the end of Fog's turn, Robert takes 1 to sack his Marsh Flats, going to get an Indatha Triumph. He then untaps for turn and draws before dashing Ragavan again and swinging him at foil, dealing 2, exiling his top card and creating a treasure. He then plays a Misty Rainforest for turn. Justin draws and plays a Rogue's Passage for turn, before tapping enough to cast his commander, Adriana, Captain of the Guard. At the end of his turn, Foil casts a Braid to destroy the Psychosis Crawler. Foil then untaps and draws for turn, before tapping out to cast his commander, Yurlok of Scorch Thrash. Fog untaps for turn, then draws and goes to combat, swinging his commander Robert for 5 commander damage. He then discards 2, draws 2, and gets 2 red mana. He then casts a Hedron Archive and sacks it to draw 2 cards and then plays a mountain for turn. Robert cracks his Misty Rainforest, taking 1 to go get his Stomping Grounds. He then untaps for turn and plays a Woodland Cemetery before tapping out to cast his commander Garth One-Eye. Justin untaps for turn and then plays a Plains. He then taps out to cast Jai's Emulating Inferno for 5, targeting all 3 commanders. He then goes to combat, swinging 1 creature at each of us, triggering his commander's melee ability and pumping all creatures up +3/+3. Fog blocks with a Scuttling Doom Engine, who dies and deals 6 damage to Justin, while Foil and Robert take their hits. Foil untaps and plays another Snow-Covered Forest. He then taps 2 for Belby Corrupted Observer, and 3 more for a Mana Flare. Fog untaps for turn, then plays a Brainstone before sacking it to Brainstorm. He then plays a Phyrexia's Core and taps it, sacking his Scrap Trawler to gain a life and bring back his Greaves from his graveyard. He then recasts Greaves along with a Goblin Engineer, putting Obsidian Battle Axe into his graveyard. Robert untaps and dashes in Ragavan, swinging to Justin for 2, exiling his top card and getting a treasure. After which, he plays the Mind Stone that he stole from Justin. He then plays a Glacial Fortress, and he taps enough to recast his commander. He then taps 1 to cast Esper Sentinel, before cracking the Mind Stone to draw a card, and sacrificing all of his treasures in order to cast an Archivist before passing his turn to Justin. Justin untaps all of his permanents for turn, then draws and plays a Plains. He then taps 3 for Aggravated Assault, then goes to combat swinging a creature at each of us, pumping up his creatures +3/+3 because of melee. Foil blocks with Belby while Fog and Robert take their hits. Justin then activates Assault, getting another combat step. He then swings at each of us again, stacking up his melee triggers and pumping up his creatures +6/+6. With no blocks declared, we all take our hits and he passes turn. Foil untaps for turn, draws, then taps enough to recast his commander along with the Commander Sphere. Fog draws for turn, then uses Goblin Engineer to sack his Spine of Ishal, returning it to his hand, in order to get his Battle Axe from his graveyard. He then recasts his commander, automatically equipping the axe, giving his commander haste. He then equips his Greaves to his commander and casts a Scrapyard Salvo, targeting Justin, dealing 7 damage to them. He then swings his commander Robert, who blocks with Garth, but still takes 2 commander damage, triggering Neheb. He then discards 2, draws 2, and gets 2 red mana. He then puts Neheb in his command zone, plays his Soul Ring, equips the Greaves to his engineer, and exiles his Foundry, shuffling his graveyard into his library. Robert untaps and draws for turn, before tapping 4 for a Timeless Witness, getting his commander back from his graveyard before tapping out to recast him. He then uses his floating mana to cast a Prismatic Bridge and passes. Justin draws and casts Chaos, so creatures can't block this turn. He then goes to combat, swinging a creature at each of us, giving them all +3/+3. He also activates Valiant Knight, giving all of his creatures double strike. Then as none of us can block, Foil gets taken out of the game. Justin then takes another combat phase and swings enough damage to take out both Robert and Fog. Today's big winner was Justin playing his rarely used Boros commander Adriana. This was a really impressive win, not just for Justin, but for Boros as a whole. I think this game really showcased how strong of a mechanic melee can be when built around properly. In my opinion, melee is a very underutilized mechanic in Magic, and also one of my favorites, so hopefully in the future it'll see some more love from Wizards of the Coast. The MVP of today's game was a coin toss between Adriana and her melee ability and Aggravated Assault. To be honest, without either, I don't know if he could have won the game. But, in the end, it had to go to Aggravated Assault since it allowed for multiple extra combat steps this game and showed us why it's such an expensive card. Thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.